My name is Connie. I am 23 years old, gender fluid, and for the past year I have chosen to live and work as a full-time live-in housemaid. To many people, that decision sounds unusual, even shocking. Yet for me, it feels more natural than any other life I have ever known. The road that led me here was anything but ordinary.
I was not born Connie.
I entered the world as Michael Allen, the only child of an affluent and highly respected family. My father owned a successful real estate company that had grown into a major business over several decades. From the moment I was old enough to understand expectations, it was assumed that I would eventually inherit and manage the family empire. My childhood was comfortable and privileged. I attended exclusive private schools, received an excellent education, and never wanted for anything materially. Later, I enrolled in one of the country's most prestigious universities, studying applied economics. To everyone around me, my future appeared clear and predetermined. But deep inside, something never felt right. While my classmates dreamed of becoming executives, entrepreneurs, lawyers, or financiers, I found myself drawn towards something entirely different. There was a longing inside me that I struggled to explain, even to myself. It was not a temporary fantasy or a passing curiosity. It was a persistent desire that followed me throughout my life. I was fascinated by the role of female domestic workers. No matter how hard I tried to dismiss it, the feeling remained. As I grew older, it only became stronger. I spent years convincing myself that I would eventually outgrow it, that maturity would somehow erase it. Instead, it settled deeper into my identity. I have always been attracted to women. There was never any confusion about that. Yet alongside my attraction existed a different kind of admiration. I admired the way women dressed, the way they carried themselves, and especially the roles some of them occupied within households. Nothing captivated me more than domestic workers. The sight of a woman cleaning, cooking, organizing a home, or wearing practical work clothing held my attention in a way I could never fully explain. Maid uniforms, aprons, housekeeping dresses, cleaning supplies, laundry routines, these ordinary things fascinated me. Whenever I encountered a woman dressed for domestic work, I felt an almost magnetic pull toward her appearance and role. It wasn't simply admiration. It was identification. I wanted to be her. That realization frightened me for many years. My parents could not have been more different from one another. My father was a large, commanding man who naturally dominated every room he entered. He was confident, decisive, and rarely questioned his own judgment. He expected things to be done properly and believed strongly in traditional ideas about success, ambition, and family responsibility. My mother, Adele, was the complete opposite. She was gentle, intellectual, and deeply absorbed in books, films, and academic discussions. While my father focused on business and practical matters, my mother lived in a world of ideas. She spent her time reading literature, attending cultural events, and discussing philosophy with friends. For most of my childhood, I assumed she simply lacked interest in household matters. Later, I would discover that her distance served another purpose. The true heart of our household was neither my father nor my mother. It was Marina. Marina was our live-in housekeeper, a Filipino woman who had worked for our family for many years. By the time I reached my teenage years, she had become an essential part of our daily lives. I first began paying special attention to her when I was around 14. At first, I could not understand why I found myself constantly watching her. It was not a schoolboy crush. It was something deeper and more complicated. Marina represented everything I secretly wished I could become. She was intelligent, capable, and endlessly hardworking. Before coming abroad, she had trained as a nurse. Like many women seeking better opportunities, she had left her profession behind and moved overseas to support her family. She had endured challenges I could barely imagine. She was divorced. She had 2 children living back home with her parents. Every month she sent money to support them. Despite carrying so many responsibilities, she remained calm, patient, and remarkably resilient. My mother's lack of interest in household management meant Marina effectively ran our home. She planned meals, prepared food, cleaned every room, handled laundry, organized supplies, managed shopping trips, coordinated maintenance, and ensured everything functioned smoothly. Our house was large, with 4 bedrooms, 2 floors, and an extensive garden. The workload was significant. Yet Marina never complained. She approached every task with quiet competence and professionalism. I admired her more than anyone else in my life. The only aspect that disappointed me, if I am being honest, was her clothing. Unlike the traditional maids I had imagined, Marina did not wear formal uniforms. My parents never required anything of the sort. Her role was closer to that of a professional housekeeper than a servant. Instead, she preferred practical house dresses imported from the Philippines. They were loose-fitting, colorful garments known as duster dresses, designed for comfort during long hours of domestic work. Over them, she often wore large cotton aprons while cooking or cleaning. The look was simple and functional, yet to me, it was beautiful. She appeared less like a stereotypical maid and more like the kind of homemaker one might find in another era, capable, organized, and quietly dignified. Then everything changed. At the time, I was 22 years old and nearing the completion of my university degree. One morning, during breakfast, my father announced that he was leaving. The memory remains vivid. My mother sat silently beside him as he explained that he would be moving out immediately. His belongings would be collected later in the day. The decision had already been made, he said, and there was no point discussing it further. My mother would explain the details. With those words, he stood, picked up a small suitcase, and walked out of the house.
Just like that.
Later, my mother revealed the truth. My father had been involved in a long-term relationship with his personal assistant, a woman named Emily Simons. According to my mother, their marriage had been struggling for years. His departure was not a sudden event, but the inevitable conclusion of a relationship that had quietly deteriorated over time. Despite everything, he had handled the financial side responsibly. He left us the house, arranged a generous yearly allowance to maintain it, and ensured Marina's employment would continue uninterrupted. My mother also possessed independent wealth inherited from her own family. Money would not be a problem. Emotionally, however, I wasn't sure what I felt. There was sadness, certainly, but there was also relief. I had never truly felt comfortable around my father. Although he was never cruel, I always sensed that I failed to meet his expectations. He wanted a strong, ambitious son who would follow directly in his footsteps. Instead, he had me. I inherited my mother's appearance more than his. I was small, slim, and soft-featured. Throughout school, classmates frequently described me as pretty rather than handsome. I hated hearing it, yet I knew there was some truth to it. I was not the son my father had imagined. After he left, my mother and I remained seated at the breakfast table. The house felt strangely quiet. Then something unexpected happened. My mother rose from her chair, walked over to me, and embraced me tightly. Physical affection had never been common between us. "Everything is going to be all right, Mike," she said softly. Then she smiled. "I think all 3 of us, you, Marina, and I, will breathe a little easier now." I looked at her in surprise. She was right. "Yes, Mother," I replied. "I think you're right." For the first time in years, she seemed genuinely at peace. "I've been ready for this for a very long time," she said. From that day forward, life inside our home began to transform. The tension that had once lingered in every room gradually disappeared. The atmosphere became lighter, warmer, and more relaxed. The most dramatic change occurred in my mother. The sadness that had always seemed to shadow her began to fade. She laughed more often. She smiled more easily. She seemed younger, somehow, as though a heavy burden had finally been lifted from her shoulders. For the first time in years, I saw her joking with Marina. The relationship between them changed as well. Only a few days after my father's departure, Marina stopped addressing her as Mrs. Allen. Instead, she began calling her simply Adele. It was a small change, but it carried enormous meaning. The old hierarchy was fading. The household no longer felt like an employer and employees sharing the same space. Instead, it felt increasingly like 3 people building a life together. One morning, while we sat eating breakfast, My mother casually introduced an idea that would ultimately alter the direction of my life. By then, Marina no longer served meals and disappeared back into the kitchen. She sat with us at the table as an equal participant in our conversations. My mother turned toward me thoughtfully. "Mike," she said, "have you ever considered helping Marina with the housework?" I looked up in surprise. She continued before I could answer. "This house is far too large for one person to manage alone. Besides, you've seemed restless recently. Unhappy, perhaps." She stirred her tea gently. "You still attend university. You still complete your assignments. But your heart doesn't seem to be in it anymore." I opened my mouth to respond. Yet before I could say a word, I realized she was absolutely correct. For months, perhaps years, I had been moving through life according to expectations that belonged to everyone except myself. And somewhere deep inside, I suspected that helping Marina might become the first step toward discovering who I truly was. For a moment, I could only stare at her. A wave of warmth rushed into my cheeks, and I felt my stomach tighten. Somehow, with only a few simple observations, my mother had brushed against a truth I had spent years protecting from the world. A truth I had barely admitted to myself. Before I could gather a response, Marina glanced at me and smiled. There was no mockery in her expression, only gentle understanding. "Michael," she said in her familiar, softly accented voice, "you don't need to be embarrassed." She folded her arms casually and leaned against the counter. "I've watched you grow up. I've known you for years. And if we're being honest, I think you've wanted this for a very long time." My face grew even hotter. Marina continued with a small laugh. "Besides, your father isn't here anymore. You don't have to worry about his opinions." The room fell silent. Then my mother spoke. "There is something else," she said carefully. I looked at her. "Marina told me she noticed certain items in your wardrobe." My heart nearly stopped. "What items?" I asked, though I already knew. She smiled gently. "Clothing." I froze. For several seconds, I couldn't speak. "Wait," I finally managed. "You've been looking through my things?" Marina immediately raised both hands. No, she said with a grin. "Not snooping. Cleaning." My mother laughed softly. "Marina wasn't spying on you. She was putting away laundry and organizing your room. Some things simply became impossible not to notice." I wished the floor would open beneath me. The collection hidden at the back of my cupboard had always been my secret. A carefully guarded secret. Now it sat exposed between the three of us. To my surprise, however, neither woman appeared shocked or concerned. If anything, they seemed relieved. My mother's voice became softer. "Michael, I've always sensed there was a side of you that didn't quite fit the expectations everyone placed upon you." She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "Mothers notice these things." I lowered my gaze. "There is absolutely nothing wrong with who you are," she continued. "People understand gender and identity very differently today than they did when I was young. The world has changed. And frankly, I think that's a good thing." I stared at her. Years of anxiety. Years of hiding. Years spent worrying about rejection. Yet here she was, speaking with acceptance so natural that it left me speechless. It felt unreal. Slowly, the walls I had built around myself began to crack. For the first time, I stopped pretending. I took a deep breath. "You're right," I admitted quietly. Both women waited patiently. "I love housework." The words sounded strange and liberating at the same time. I know it probably sounds ridiculous, but watching Marina work always fascinated me. Cleaning, organizing, cooking, taking care of a home. I searched for the right words. "It feels peaceful." My voice grew steadier. "When I watch her, everything seems calm, ordered, meaningful. There is something deeply satisfying about it." My mother smiled. Not the smile of someone surprised by a revelation. The smile of someone hearing confirmation of what she already knew. "Then perhaps it's time you learned," she said. I looked up. She nodded toward Marina. "Let her teach you." The suggestion hung in the air. My pulse quickened. My mother continued. "You can become Marina's assistant. Learn everything properly." Marina immediately grinned. Her apprentice maid. The phrase sent a rush of excitement through me. Apprentice maid. Junior maid. The words ignited something I had carried inside for years. A dream I had never expected to become reality. Before I could fully absorb the moment, Marina was already issuing instructions.
Well,
She gestured toward the staircase. What are you waiting for? I blinked. She spoke as though the matter had already been settled. Go upstairs. Put on that gray maid dress hidden in your wardrobe. The one with the white apron. My jaw nearly dropped. You know about that one too? She laughed. Of course I do. Then she pointed toward the stairs again. Put it on. Wear comfortable shoes. Then come back downstairs. Her tone shifted into professional seriousness. Training starts today. I looked from Marina to my mother. Neither appeared to find this unusual. Neither laughed.
neither questioned it.
To them, it was simply clothing. My mother smiled warmly. Darling, clothes don't change who you are. She tilted her head. They simply help express a part of yourself you've kept hidden. The reassurance settled something inside me. For years I had been waiting for permission.
Perhaps from society.
Perhaps from my family. Perhaps from myself. Now that permission had finally arrived. Without another word, I stood and headed upstairs. As I climbed the staircase, I glanced back. My mother and Marina exchanged a brief look. A look that suggested they had discussed this possibility long before today. Maybe they had. Maybe this entire conversation had been gently orchestrated. At that moment, I didn't care.
All I knew was that my heart was racing.
I opened my wardrobe. Hidden behind ordinary clothes was the outfit I had secretly purchased months earlier. With trembling hands, I changed. Every piece felt strangely familiar despite how rarely I had worn it. When I finally looked in the mirror, I felt something shift inside me. Not transformation. Recognition. As though I was seeing a version of myself that had always existed beneath the surface. Eventually, I gathered enough courage to return downstairs. The sounds of household activity echoed from the kitchen. Running water, clinking dishes, the quiet rhythm of domestic work. When I entered, Marina was standing at the sink washing breakfast dishes. She wore one of her colorful house dresses beneath a practical apron. Rubber gloves covered her hands. To me, she looked exactly as she always had. Capable, confident, comfortable in her role.
She turned.
Her eyes widened. Then a broad smile spread across her face. Oh my goodness. She set down a plate. You look wonderful. My cheeks flushed again. Marina stepped closer and examined me with approval. Very convincing. She nodded thoughtfully. And without any makeup at all. I laughed nervously. You really think so? Absolutely. Then her expression softened. And your figure works surprisingly well with the uniform. I looked down. For the first time in my life, I wasn't embarrassed by what I saw. I hesitated. Different. I shook my head.
No.
A smile slowly appeared. I feel right. The words emerged naturally, as if I've finally found the place I've been searching for. Marina nodded. She seemed unsurprised. Good. Then her practical side immediately took over. Now, before we begin, there are two important matters. I straightened instinctively. She pointed toward my dress. First, we'll make a few adjustments. Nothing dramatic. Just enough shaping to improve the fit. Then she tapped her chin thoughtfully. Second, you need a proper name. A name? She nodded. You can't spend all day dressed like that while answering to Michael. I blinked. She had a point. For years I had imagined everything except that detail. I had never chosen a name. Marina considered the question carefully. Then her face brightened. I have one. I waited. When I worked abroad years ago, I knew a woman named Connie. She smiled. Kind. Hardworking. Reliable. Her eyes met mine. I think that name would suit you. Something stirred inside me. The name felt unexpectedly perfect.
Connie.
Simple.
Warm.
Comfortable. I repeated it quietly. Connie. The sound alone filled me with excitement. Marina grinned. There. She clapped her hands once. Problem solved. And just like that, Connie was born. The rest of the morning became my first lesson. Marina explained the fundamental rules of household management. The kitchen, she informed me, was the heart of every home. If the kitchen was neglected, everything else eventually followed. Therefore, it always came first. After the kitchen came bathrooms. After bathrooms came bedrooms. Every task had an order. Every room had standards. Every tool had a purpose. Cleanliness was not random. It was a system, a discipline, a craft. She handed me a cleaning cloth and a bottle of spray cleaner. Let's begin.